Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about something that I didn't think was actually a topic I wanted to address, but I'm going to do it anyways because I don't think when I created a video about why the Wii U failed and how the Switch is succeeding, I didn't really talk at length about why I feel like the Switch is going to continue to succeed and be a massive success. I don't know if it's going to be on the Wii scale, but I feel like it could get the 3DS numbers. And I feel like I need to address this not because of that video particularly, but because of another video I created where I talked about fanboyism and console wars and how they are utterly stupid and always have been stupid and always will be stupid. And I feel like I know that this kind of video almost attributes to console wars and fanboyism, but that's not the intent of the video. The intent is to inform people why I feel like the Switch is going to succeed, and succeed in the face of some harsh criticism it gets from naysayers. And it's okay for naysayers to exist. Let me put that out there. The Switch is not a massive success yet. It had a successful launch, and we've seen other systems like the Wii U have a successful launch and go on to be a failure of a system in terms of sales. So launch numbers aren't necessarily something to base a system success on. However, there are factors that I feel like the Switch has going its way that are going to lead to a more successful go at it, as it were. And those factors essentially round up into three main pillars. The first is that Nintendo has finally addressed game droughts, at least in this first year. We obviously have no idea what's coming in 2018, or we have a small idea on a couple games. But we know that at least 2017, from what Nintendo has told us, is pretty jam-packed. Okay, we had Zelda at launch, we had Mario Kart 8 the second month, we had Minecraft the third month, fourth month we have ARMS, fifth month we have Splatoon 2, we don't know yet what we get in the sixth month or the seventh month. By the eighth month we're talking Super Mario Odyssey, we still have Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which was announced for this year, among some other games that are probably going to be coming. We know when NBA 2K is going to release, we always know when that game is going to release, we know when FIFA is going to come out, we know Skyrim Remastered is in there somewhere. We know that the Switch has a consistent release slate of AAA quality games heading its way throughout the entirety of this year. And that's important because the Wii U did not have that. The DS did not really have that. The Nintendo 3DS didn't really even have that. The Wii was close. The Wii didn't quite have a major third-party AAA game or a major first-party AAA game hitting every single month post-release, but Wii Sports was kind of a phenomenon, and it kind of carried the system. Wii Sports sold like 80 million units. Wii Sports is a phenomenon. So we're not going to necessarily compare this to the Wii because I don't feel like that's a comparable situation. However, there are some things that the Switch is doing that fit into the mantra that it's going to succeed. And that leads to my second point, where I feel like Nintendo with the Switch is remembering who they are, okay? So Nintendo has never been a company that has stuck to the industry standards, right? In fact, if they stuck to the industry standards back during the 80s, the NES wouldn't have been as big as it was, and the industry might not have even been saved. And we're not just talking about like the D-pad. The D-pad was a revolution. We're talking about how Nintendo restricted content on their platform. One of the big reasons the video game industry collapsed in on itself during the 70s and 80s is because Atari and other platforms out there, they did not gate content coming to their system. There was no approval. Anyone could release a game on the platform. And that's kind of an issue Steam is running into right now as well. But we're just going to stick with Nintendo for now. So there's an issue where anyone can release content on the platform, and when that happens, when there's no approval process for that content, it means that there's a lot of really, really crappy quick-make games releasing that aren't any good, and they flood the market, and you end up with a zillion copies of E.T. No. I mean, that's just one example, one of the bad examples for NES. But my point is that the market gets flooded with a bunch of games. The good games get hard to find, get drowned out. And next thing you know, when consumers, when they keep buying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they get to their sixth game in a row that all six of them are terrible and they're not having a good time and they're barely playable, the market begins to crash in on itself because people don't feel like there's anything worth playing. It doesn't matter if there really is. because consumers at that time couldn't find it. Enter Nintendo with their strict gated process, getting rid of a lot of shovelware, and that doesn't mean there weren't bad games and shovelware on the NES. There certainly were, but they were to a far lesser degree than the industry was used to. And then on top of that, they introduced, the 2 buttons with the D-pad, which ended up being a more comfortable way for consumers to play games than they had been accustomed to with the Atari and the joystick. So combine all that together, and Nintendo went against the industry norm. They got rid of the joystick. They introduced strict guidelines for games to get onto their platform with a strict approval process. And lo and behold, ta-da! The NES blew up into this big phenomenon and rebuilt the gaming industry. Then they did something that people weren't doing with the Game Boy. They released a system that could play games almost to the level of an NES in black and white on the go. And people didn't think that was going to be something that could work, because at that time, the only kind of games that you saw exist, even if persisted into the 90s, were individual games sold for handheld purposes. I remember playing a football game with the little dots way back in the day. There was just a lot of individual games released as their own standalone thing, but Nintendo Game Boy, that really brought in a whole new market of people for gaming on the go, even with the fact that it ate through AA batteries like crazy. Did not eat through them as much as the Game Gear did, which might have been part of the reason the Game Gear did not sell as well. Besides that, it was big and bulky. It was not very power efficient, and that's something you have to consider on a portable system. Now, you fast forward, and Nintendo began losing market share from the Super Nintendo forward until the Wii. So the Super Nintendo sold less than the NES, the N64 sold less than the SNES, and the GameCube sold even less than the Super NES and the N64. So when Nintendo kept having declining market share, and then they decided, we need to stop trying to do what the rest of the industry is doing, which is what they were doing. They were trying to keep up with the industry, not necessarily conforming to their exact standards, but essentially trying to do the same thing, which is just release a more powerful system, which has been what they did at that point, right? From the SNES, I should say, through the GameCube, all Nintendo did was just keep releasing more powerful systems of their prior system, right? That was the go-to thing. That's what PlayStation and Xbox have done as well. Just released a more powerful version of the current system, essentially. And Nintendo realized that it was driving a lot of consumers away. That there was a market that wasn't playing games anymore because controllers had gotten too complex with 2 joysticks and all those buttons, and that maybe people didn't care so much about HD at the time, and that maybe pushing for more power isn't necessarily the best way to do it. It's making these things super expensive. I mean, remember that $599 launch point for the PlayStation 3? Stupidly expensive. So Nintendo's like, look, we think there could be a new market for games, for people who aren't playing games because they think it's too complex. And we need something that's going to appeal to them. Sports obviously was a massive appeal factor, and thus the Wii happened with motion controls. And those motion controls still exist today. Not just because the Switch has motion controls, but the VR space survives on motion controls. Yes, you can play games with a traditional controller, but let's be honest, the best games on virtual reality take advantage of motion controls. And Nintendo popularized that concept with the Wii. So Nintendo went out and they said, look, we're going to revolutionize the industry again and look for consumers that are forgotten. Then you enter the Wii U. The Wii U was more like another GameCube with a second screen. I'm not really sure what Nintendo's goal was with this system, because Nintendo themselves never really supported that second screen experience really well. They didn't support asynchronous gaming really well. I went over a whole bunch of this about why the Wii U failed before. I'll put a link down in the description, or you can check the Twitter card above the Twitter card, the card on the top right corner of this video, and that'll give you a link as well to the video. But what happened is that the Wii U continued the trend that the GameCube had, where it was just releasing a more powerful version of the prior console. And that's not what consumers want, right? Consumers have already moved on to smart devices and, HD systems at the time. And releasing a system that does what everything else does was not something that consumers wanted. And that's an important point to make, because if Nintendo Switch wasn't what it was a traditional home box you put underneath your TV that's as powerful as a PlayStation 4 or even a PlayStation 4 Pro, it would not be selling as well as the Nintendo Switch is. And I'm going to get into this soon, but essentially the reason for that is because it would just be another more powerful than the Wii U type of iteration that Nintendo has proven has led to less and less market share. because there are other people doing that better, right? The Xbox Scorpio is about to come out. Why would people buy a Nintendo version that's less powerful than that right now? That doesn't make any sense. So what Nintendo realized is, after seeing the failure of the Wii U, after seeing declining sales with the 3DS, they realized that there is a market out there, in examining it, that isn't being catered to right now. And it's a market that would like the ability to game at home and game on the go, but not have a lesser experience doing it. Not have to buy separate games for separate devices. People who want that high-quality AAA experience on a TV, but might not want to downgrade to playing a game on their phone on the go or down to a game on the 3DS. That want a full experience, a full AAA quality game everywhere they are. And that's what the Switch does. The Switch caters to a market that admittedly is mostly adults, that is severely leaning towards people who have really busy lives and are on the go all the time. And that's a market that no home console can appeal to. No gaming PC can appeal to, because none of those are portable, right? Even if you have a laptop you could take with you, how often are you busting that laptop out during your commute to game? To have that system heat up and burn your lap? It's not happening. People aren't doing it. It's too risky, for starters, because it's bulky. They can get hit. They could break because you're around a lot of people. Versus a small device you can hold in your hand that gives you that same experience you were just playing on your TV, maybe before you even went on the commute. Or when you get home, you can plop on that TV and get that same experience again. Like, it's insanely appealing for that alone. And that's why my second point is that Nintendo remembered who they are. They are a company that does not stick to the norm. They constantly look for the markets not being served, or if the gaming market itself, the core market of like PlayStation and Xbox, is sinking really bad, they figure out why that is, and then they fix it. And that's what they did in the 80s, and then that's what they did with the Wii, and now it's what they're doing again with the Switch. There are a lot of lapsed gamers that buy the Xbox One or the PlayStation 4 who bought an Xbox 360 or a PlayStation 3. If you look at the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 sales alone, that's 160 million units. That's 160 million market. And the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One are not on pace to sell a combined 160 million units. They might be lucky to even sell a combined 100 million units, right? Which is what the Wii sold on its own. So forget the lapsed Wii audience and the lapsed DS audience. There's a lapsed audience of core gamers as well. And some of that's because they're not really buying into the whole, oh, let's just get a more powerful version of what we already have thing. And they're also not buying into the fact that they need to spend all this money on a new platform when they don't have the time to sit in front of their TV and game all the time. And that's an audience Nintendo has hit with the Switch. So that's a big reason I think the Switch is going to continue to succeed at the level it is. Consistent game releases and a platform that does something that no one else is doing right now. Lastly, I feel like the Switch has the proper price point. I know there are people that will argue it is overpriced compared to the PlayStation 4 or the Xbox One or the Xbox One S or the PlayStation 4 Pro or whatever the Xbox Scorpio is going to cost, whether it's $400, $500, etc. That it's going to be overpriced in comparison when you just do an apples-to-apples comparison of the power. And you can't do an apples-to-apples comparison of the power. And let me explain why. The Switch is a banana. Okay? And let's say the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 are an apple. A juicy, delicious apple. Let's call it a Honeycrisp apple, right? Some of the most tastiest apples on the market, the premium apple, the apple that a lot of people really, really want, can't always afford, but they really, really want it, and it's delicious and it's tasty, and man, I really want a Honeycrisp apple right now. But the Switch is a banana, right? And no one's going to confuse a banana for an apple. There are advantages for a banana and an apple, but they are completely different things that are both fruits, right? They're both fruits. So the Nintendo Switch, the Xbox One, the PlayStation 4, gaming PCs, they are all gaming platforms. They are things that people buy to play video games. However, the Nintendo Switch is a different kind of fruit. It is not that sweet Honeycrisp apple. It is that delicious banana. And cue the Donkey Kong chugging bananas down, the late Satoru Iwata staring intently at some bananas. Reality is that the Switch is not doing what those other systems are doing. So when you're talking about price, the $300 price point, the Nintendo Switch itself is literally a tablet. Forget the Joy-Cons, forget the dock. It is literally a tablet. And as a tablet, it is one of the most powerful tablets on the market. It might even be the most powerful or the second most powerful out there. And tablets that compare to it, power-wise, cost $1,000, cost $600, cost $800. The prices really vary depending on brand, Android, Apple, blah, blah, blah. But they're all really, really expensive to get the kind of capabilities that the system has. Now, one advantage those expensive systems have, they all have better screens. They have OLED screens. They have 1080p. They have 4K. They have Retina displays. They have displays that are vastly superior to Nintendo's 720 display. And they don't have a plastic part on, like Nintendo covered their LCD with a plastic protector instead of the typical glass or Gorilla Glass you see on phones and tablets. However, you're also paying significantly more for those devices, right? Of course it's got OLED. Of course it's got a 4K. It's got Retina. You're paying $1,000 for those devices. The Switch is $300 and produces better looking games than those devices do, despite having a lower resolution. That's awesome, right? And that's not counting the fact that it includes traditional controls. It includes motion controls. It includes the ability to quickly dock it to the TV without having to buy a separate device, right? Like you can use like say an Apple iPad and you can use it on your TV if you have an Apple TV. You have to buy a completely separate device to make it work. The Switch comes with what you need. And you just drop it in and pull it out and it's completely seamless. There's no syncing, there's no weird things you have to worry about. It's just easy. It's simple and it's affordable. That's something I want to kind of hit on here. This Nintendo Switch isn't overpriced. It's just being compared to the wrong thing. It has an appealing factor to a lapsed gamer, and it also has an appealing factor to casual gamers, I'd argue. And on top of that, it's got a consistent release slate of AAA games. And whether or not third parties can succeed on it, I have no idea. Will Skyrim Remastered show that there's a market for third-party games? I hope so. But I don't know. And it's still going to have that issue of getting third-party games because third parties are waiting for the prove it mode. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that suddenly the Switch is going to have all the third-party games. But what I do know is that Nintendo has proven in the past they don't necessarily need third-party games to appeal to a wider market. They pulled that off with the DS. They pulled that off with the Wii. They kind of sort of did it with the 3DS. Nintendo is going to be fine. And if they need more games, the fact that it's a portable means it could get Pokemon, it could get Monster Hunter, it could get all these other vastly popular games in Japan and worldwide that can continue to push sales. This could be a system that could get up to 100 million units. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think the Nintendo Switch is going to be a pretty big success story, and I'm saying that as someone who obviously owns a Switch, owns a bunch of games for it. So yes, I have a little bias. I run a Nintendo channel, I run a Nintendo website, I worked at Zelda Informer for 8 years, but I think the facts kind of line up. It's happening. And the sales are lining up as well. We are now in the second quarter of the system being on the market, and it is still selling out. I mean, that's good news, right? I mean, in Japan, it's like topping sales charts every single week, which no Nintendo system has really done since, like, there was like 2 years of 3DS doing it all the time. Now the Switch is doing it. No home console has pulled that off. And again, I just said it's more of a portable system than a home console, but it does both. And that's part of the beauty. I think Nintendo has a real winner on its hands here. It's not perfect. There are other things I like about it. The parental app I think is fantastic. The fact that there's going to be like this Rainway or Rainstorm or some rain app coming out that's going to let you do PC streaming more. I'm pretty excited. This is awesome. I mean, if you are a gamer right now, I don't think there's a better time to be a gamer than right this moment. You have the Nintendo Switch catering to lapsed gamers and a more open market that don't have time to sit in front of their TVs. PC gaming is at an all-time high with AMD making a huge comeback with Ryzen, and they got their Vega GPUs coming out, and NVIDIA just released their new generation of GPUs, and they're already talking about their next 2018 GPUs. They're going to make everything even more affordable. Intel has started to drop their prices because of AMD Ryzen. So like PC gaming is becoming extremely affordable. For under $1,000, you can actually build a rig that can max out settings on things at 1080p. That's awesome. You have the Xbox Scorpio coming out that's going to be pushing the bleeding edge of home console capabilities for 4K gaming. You have the PlayStation 4 Pro out there and the PlayStation 4 itself in general that has done extremely well for itself in terms of having high quality games come out at a pretty consistent pace with promises for more high quality games coming out. You have the Xbox One S on the market right now, which is one of the most affordable 4K Blu-ray players on the market, which is amazing. I mean, you have the 3DS is still out there for people who need a cheap handheld for, and especially with the 2DS XL coming out, need a cheap handheld for their kids. Like you have phones that are capable of having really high quality games on them now. Like, this is an amazing time to be a gamer. Can we not agree? There are so many options and so many devices and so many ways to game that cater to all these different lifestyles out there. Like, I am beyond thrilled that I am 30 years old, still in the prime of my gaming age, and thoroughly enjoying a market that caters to basically any gamer that could possibly exist out there. That's just awesome. And I am glad that I'm someone that enjoys the wide spectrum of gaming, that I enjoy everything. But the Switch, I think Nintendo did it. I think they found a market. We'll see. Time will tell if I'm correct. Anyways, this is Nathaniel Ruffledance from Nintendo Prime, signing out.